Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 70-73 Carryover League. Looking at the hot stove trades that have transpired. We're going to do this video in two segments. We're going to look at the actual transactions in the spreadsheet with some analysis. And then at the end of the video, we're going to look at the cards themselves and see their new homes and the players. Hot stove resolved itself in one long period here. Got it all done at once by looking at transactions that occurred after all of the individual years that we saw in the videos off of Baseball Reference. Now, what you're looking at here is the last few carousel trades. And a carousel trade, if you recall, is when trades done before the draft starts so that each team can have the proper number of 12 carry-on guys, 4 keeper guys, 2 waived guys, and 2 retired guys. These are trades by necessity, just to kind of make fits. But now we do the actual, trades designed to improve their lots in the league. Try to mirror some of the more important trades that happened in Major League Baseball history when applicable. So that's all subjective. The high water mark, I always say, was the Joe Morgan going from Houston to the Reds. Tom Seaver going from the Reds to the Mets later, from the Mets to the Reds later in the decade, as trades that I want to kind of continue on with. But we're going to look at the transactions and then look at the team cards and find out what has happened in the hot stove trade league. And let's get started. Post carousel trades. Here we go. The very first one is a nice trade with the Indians and Orioles. This was all about Frank Robinson being highly sought after by Cleveland to be the first player chosen in the draft, even though he's over 30. He's 31 by this point. But eventually he becomes a player manager for the Indians. But he would play for the Dodgers and Angels before then. Not anymore. Now he's going to go directly to Cleveland from Baltimore. Baltimore would only do this because the Indians are no longer in their division. Remember, there's realignment. Baltimore, Boston, New York, and Toronto play in the American League East. Cleveland, of course, the American League North with Detroit and the Expos and the expansion Ohio players. So that's why Baltimore would do it. And actually, looking at the compensation involved, it looks like Cleveland did pretty good for themselves. They sent Eddie Watt, corner outfielder Roy Foster, for Frank Robinson, corner outfielder Danny Walton. Baltimore gets a token in this as well. That's a draft move or a draft pick. Cleveland from the Indians in that deal. On the Orioles side of things, they liked Roy Foster in a short sample size, comparing favorably to Frank Robinson offensively. He has 23 home runs and a -2 arm, and Danny Walton is not quite as good. And Baltimore likes Eddie Watt to return to their bullpen. And again, the reason they were able to move Frank Robinson is because Al Bumbry has to get into the Baltimore outfield with Don Buford and Paul Blair and now Roy Foster. So you see Baltimore still has a crowded outfield. All right, we'll look at the cards at the end of the video. Next, we have Detroit and Texas. We talked about this trade. If you watch the World Series, Detroit lost the World Series to the Mets, largely because the left side of the Tiger infield was not very good. It was Elliot Maddox, Dick Tracewski, and Kevin Collins. We know that they would trade for Ed Brinkman and Aurelio Rodriguez. Rodriguez is not available. He's on the Las Vegas expansion team. But Ed Brinkman is a guy who is a 2 at short. You can bump him up to a Gold Glover. Maddox is okay, and he's a nice utility player. His bat improves by the late 70s. But the key here is that the Tigers had to fork up a token for a 260 hitting, singles hitting shortstop. So that's a good move for Texas to get a token out of the Tigers in the deal, because no other players seem to fit. Next move, blockbuster, huge player rotation here coming up with Milwaukee and Boston and Oakland. Oh my goodness. Huge trade involving 7 players. Can you do an odd number player trade and everybody has a correct number of players left? Yes. It's a little complicated, but it works. So, Milwaukee sends Tommy Harper and Marty Patton to Boston, and they send Mike Hegan to Oakland. Boston sends Cal Kuntz to Oakland, George Scott to Milwaukee, and a draft token to Milwaukee. And Oakland sends 2 guys, Jesus Alou and Mike Torres, to the Brewers, while getting Cal Kuntz from Boston and Mike Hegan to Oakland. So how does this work for everybody? Milwaukee gets a draft token out of it for an expansion team. It's an extra draft pick. They like that. George Scott, Milwaukee likes that as well. For Boston, they liked getting Harper and Patton in this transaction. This actually did occur, of course. You can put Harper at second base, third base, or the outfield. Boston won't hold Marty Patton very long. Eventually, he gets sent to Kansas City, but he's doing well right now. Oakland desired a left-handed hitting first baseman. They wanted Don Mincher. He was unavailable. They wanted Mike Epstein. He was unavailable. They settled for Mike Hegan in a short sample size. He hits 320. Not a power hitter, but good defense, and he hit 320. And he satisfies. They needed a left-handed bat in that Oakland lineup to join Reggie. Because Joe Rudy was playing first base, and you will put Rudy in left field, vacated by Jesus Alou. So these 3 teams are pretty happy with all that. We'll look at the individual teams later and see how happy they are. All right. Here is a big move coming. Big move. The New York Mets. World champs. And then we talked about Singleton and Rusty Staub swapping spots. But there was a little problem there. Rusty Staub is on the Expos keeper list, and the Mets have no room for a keeper because they have Tom Seaver, Jerry Kuzman, Cleon Jones, Jerry Grody, all keepers, so no room for Rusty Staub. They did the next best thing. They sent Singleton to the Giants, and they're going to wait a year before getting Rusty Staub. So the Mets will get Rusty Staub. It's going to take a year. But the good news for the Mets is they get Willie Mays younger than when they actually acquired him for $73. They're going to get a nice 1970 Willie Mays, who has range and arm in center field still, to replace the departed Tommy A.G., who they couldn't keep and sent to Toronto because they couldn't afford to keep Tommy A.G. and all the rest. So the Giants, you're looking at this trade, and when you put a player named Willie Mays in a trade, that's going to cost you 2 tokens every time. If you're going to put Willie Mays in a deal. So not 1, but 2 tokens, 2 draft picks in this move for the Mets. It's risky for the Mets, but their outfield now will be Cleon Jones in left, Willie Mays in center, and to be determined in right field. For the Giants, they can bump Singleton up to that 73 card, send him to the Expos. The Expos could send Staub to the Mets, and the Mets could send other compensation to the Giants in a future deal. I would consider this trade to be continued. But for now, the math works for the 2 squads. And the last trade in the Hot Stove League between surprising division rivals, Cardinals and Cubs. Milt Pappas, it's basically Milt Pappas for Jose Cardinal. The Cubs had too many right-handed pitchers. We talked about how they have Fergie Jenkins, Burhoot, and Milt Pappas. They had to make room for Rick Russell and Ray Burris. So Jose Cardinal was desired. The Cardinals could afford to move Cardinal, who actually played for the Cubs. Jose Ortiz is a nice replacement. He's a nice replacement in center field for Cardinal in a short sample size. He has 300. Milt Pappas joins Bob Gibson and Rick Wise in the Cardinal rotation. That's a nice pitching addition there for the Cardinals. So that's the end of the Hot Stove trades. Now we're going to look at the cards themselves and see how they look. Okay, baseball fans, here we are with the 70-73 current card sets. These are arranged from the team picking first in the draft to the world champion team, Mets here. Indians pick first in the draft. We're going to take a look at how the Hot Stove trades affected the rosters. And the stacks, there's 12 cards on each of these instead of 20. The draft, everybody drafts 8 guys. So we're going to look first. The team that made the first move was Cleveland. When you look at their 12 men on the roster, the only change, because Frank Robinson and Eddie Watt were keepers, So the only change is that Danny Walton is now the left fielder instead of Roy Foster, who we'll see later. Pinson's still in center, and then Frank Robinson will be playing right field for the Indians. The next couple teams didn't make any moves. The Cubs, we'll take a look at them here. And with the Cubs, we'll see a new center fielder, and we'll see a change in pitching. So in their outfield now, you'll have Billy Williams in left, Jose Cardinal in center, Jim Hickman in right field. Look at that. These are all really nice bats here. And you don't even need a platoon or anything else with that. So they were able to now, as you can see, we've got our 3 lefties already. Gurr would be going to a relief starter. He can go be your number 3 starter now. And now you have room for Ray Burris and Rick Russell to join this pitching staff. Nice little setup there for the Cubs. All right, next up is the Rangers. And the only move, of course, was a swap of infielders. And there is Elliot Maddox. He will now have to play short, but he can also play second or third, as can Bernie Allen, as can Dave Nelson. So sometimes these lesser teams like versatility in their roster construction. All right, the Brewers, part of that big 3-team trade, getting players from the Red Sox and the A's. So there is McNerney catches. George Scott's now your first baseman, taking over for Hegan. You could also play third if necessary. No third baseman because Tommy Harper is gone in the deal. J.L. Lew is a much better left fielder. Briggs and Reichert also can play in the outfield. You could actually even put Reichert at third base where you had Harper. And in the pitching staff, Mike Torres can pitch on 3 days rest, as you see, joining Bill Parsons. Jerry Royce is a 3-starter. And you got the back end of a bullpen, Stevenson and Sanders. And they get a draft token. Nice moves for Milwaukee. Next few teams, Ohio and Arizona, didn't make moves. The Expos have to wait on the Rusty Staub Singleton thing. Cardinals. So the Cardinals, here's their new center fielder I talked about, Jose Ortiz. And again, this is a nice card to, .295 hitting center fielder. Okay. Lou Brock will come back to play left. They can have Gosger play right in a platoon. But the pitching is looking pretty good now, because now you got Gibson, Pappas, Simpson, and Abernathy. Nice pitching here. Of course, Gibson, Pappas, that was a nice little prize there. 2.77 ERA. Wayne Simpson's 70 card before his injury with the Reds. They're gonna, they're Cubs and Cards got to make some moves to catch up to the Pirates and the Reds. All right, then we have a nice gap of teams not making any deals. Let's take a look at Baltimore. So their outfield will be Buford in left. Paul Blair is going to be in center. And they're going to have Bunbury in left or DH, or right or DH. But here's the guy, Foster, that I like better than Danny Walton. That's a nice card when you factor in the hit by pitch and the on bases, the power. And again, it's just for 70. He'll replace, Frank Robinson's 70, production-wise. But a nice speedy outfield is on the way with Buford, Blair, and Bunbury having great cards and as teammates. So the Orioles are looking at some speed on that team now. Here's Oakland, and they are going to make some moves to get into the dynasty territory. Tennis now will just be a catcher, not first baseman. There's Hegan. We talked about him. They wanted Mincher or Epstein, but my goodness, you don't have the power, but you do have the batting average. And they needed left-handed bats because they don't have a lot of them. That's why they held on to Donaldson. And you have Bando and Campanera. So here's Joe Rudy. Now, he's going to lose the ability to play first base because he's going to become a 1 in left field. We're going to bump up the Rudy card. Manguel could still play center field for another year with Reggie in right. As far as the pitching goes, They're going to have Ken Holtzman joining Hunter in blue. So Kuntz is good enough to be a number 4 starter for them. Okay. A few more teams to go here. Interestingly enough, the teams that made the most moves are the teams who were in the league championship series at the end here. Let's look at the Giants. Remember the Willie Mays trade, but guess what, folks? They actually have better center fielders waiting in the wings. So here is your 2-2E12 in center field, and you got Bonds is the center fielder. He's a 1-4E1 in center field. You might as well use him there. And then you can put Singleton in the left field. So that's your outfield now, and it's still a great outfield. And you get the 2 draft tokens. The 2 draft tokens from the Mets in the deal. Okay, the Red Sox. The reconstituted Red Sox. They're going to take a slight step down because they're going to lose the 69 Rico Petrocelli card, which was ridiculous. 2E16 shortstop with 40 home runs. So he'll become ordinary from now on. That will help the rest of the American League East, I guess. You got Fisk. Yastrzemski now has room at first base. You don't need to put that E16 in left field. You got Tommy Harper. You can put him at second now, or third, or the left field where he's a 2. Kennedy can play short now with Petrocelli going to third. Now, as far as pitching goes, they can make some moves here in the rotation because Patton can pitch on 3 days rest with Sonny Siebert, Moret, and Tiant. But I think they're going to bump Bill Lee into the rotation and move Moret to the bullpen. You see, Moret can only pitch on 3 days rest here in 71 innings. So even though he's a starter 7, he would become a very good lefty reliever in this situation. As we know, Bill Lee will become a good starting pitcher. So that's looking really good for the Red Sox. All right, the Tigers, thinking that one defensive move will improve their lot. And there he is, Ed Brinkman. Again, he's a 2E24, he's a singles hitter. Cost him a token, folks, but you can make him a 1. And if the rest of your team is great, then it all makes sense. Hopefully, maybe they can find a good defensive third baseman while they're at it. And lastly, the world champion Mets made a expensive move. They acquired Willie Mays. So, you still have Kranepool, Clendenon, Garrett, Heiss. And your current outfield is Cleon Jones will be in left field. There's Willie Mays. Not quite as good as Tommy A.G., but hardly anybody could be as good as Tommy A.G. But great defensive center fielder for the Mets. Frank Johnson becomes your new right fielder instead of Rusty Staub. That leaves a little bit to be desired. But you could actually even put Kranepool out here, like that. Kranepool and Johnson, and give Clendenon full-time first base duties. And the Mets got Willie Mays without having to sacrifice any of their brilliant pitching. They still have Seaver and Kuzman and these guys. So to get Willie Mays without losing any talent other than Singleton is a boon for the Mets. It cost them financially 2 draft tokens. That's it for the Hot Stove League. Hope you're enjoying the league, which will get started. I'll have the draft around St. Patrick's Day weekend in March. Before that, of course, Winter Baseball Classic, using cards from 1970 in a little tournament just to take a look at them. And the league starts in late March. Thanks for checking it all out.